Hi, my name is Adrian Reed, and I'm really pleased to be joined today by Lynda Girvan, who is Head of Business Analysis at CMC Partnership Consultancy, and Will Izzard, who is Head of Business Change at CMC. And both of you are speaking at the IRM BCT, the Business Change and Transformation Conference. And I know that you're giving a half-day workshop on the first day on the afternoon, which is entitled Mind the Gap, Incorporating the Change Agenda into Scaled Agile Approaches. So that's one that I'm very much looking forward to, and I'm really pleased you're able to make some time to have a bit of a chat today. So I thought it would be worth starting by, it's interesting, isn't it? It seems like so many organizations are moving away from traditional program management, you know, with its strengths and its weaknesses, but then are finding scaling to be a real issue. So what sort of issues do you come across, do you see with scaling, and what causes them?
Well, I think we've both got a view on this, so I'll start if that's okay, Will. I think what we're finding is people are moving away from traditional program management in favour of scaled agile approaches because it's got portfolio management in that top layer, especially scaled agile approaches such as scaled agile framework for the enterprise, a SAFE framework. And they think that it's got everything in there that they need. But actually, if you look into it a little bit more, traditional sort of program management was all about delivering change. Whereas the purpose behind scaled agile frameworks is all about delivering, you know, solutions or products or service to customers so they achieve value. And those two things aren't quite the same. So there are pros and cons in both. But actually, if you start to look at the benefits and disadvantages, if you like, between both of those approaches, you'll find there's a slight gap emerging, which is around the change agenda, in that change is sort of getting forgotten a little bit in amongst that. And I think people that are moving away from program management, which had a really robust, embedded sort of approach to change, they're leaving that behind and going to scaled agile and then struggling to land changes, especially when you're delivering internal change. I think if you're delivering products to the outside world, it's not such an impact. But if you're using scaled agile instead of program management to deliver internal change, I think that's people are getting themselves a little bit unstuck.
Yeah, I would agree. So yes, there is a move away from traditional program management, which is the world I started in. And yes, it does have change built into the agenda. But I think there's probably just a general view that it's showing its age, or it's not cool with the kids. You know, it's probably a little bit locked in with how it operates. And I think it expects a lot of people to be thinking in these kind of outcome terms at the beginning of something, when you know least about what's going to happen, and to keep with that for a year, 18 months or so. So yes, I would agree with that view.
I think some of the things that we've brought about and identified in our talk really is about with program management, you're sort of backing the winner from the start. You sort of know what you want to change, or there's an assumption you know what to change. And then there's lots of rigor put around change management to sort of avoid it changing, if you like, which sort of ends up coming a little bit like change prevention. Yeah. In contrast, Agile's all about, we don't really know what we want. We've got some loose idea, but we'll test that hypothesis and learn as we go. And those two approaches aren't necessarily compatible, but they don't also land well with people necessarily in the way they approach or receive change.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I know your title mentions the change agenda. And you mentioned this gap, almost like sort of mind the gap type of thing, of change can be missing. But I'm imagining many people listening and watching this will have a slightly different view on what we mean by change. So when you say change, what do you mean?
When we say change, what we mean is that somebody will be doing something differently, or a group of people will be working in a different way, new ways of working, for example. And change management, we as CMC, we are advocates of the ProSci methodology. So we see that as a tool for helping and shepherding people through a change, where the change is something you're doing your job differently. So that's what we mean by the change agenda.
And I think in terms of what that means, where Agile's concerned is, strategic change is long-reaching. It's 12 months plus. But actually, if you're delivering in an Agile way, where you might be delivering every 2 weeks or every 3 to 3 months or so, it depends on how incremental you are. Change is happening quickly, and also you're doing a learning approach, which might mean that the original vision is maybe not the right vision. The strategic direction you set a year previously may have changed through that delivery, but also you're delivering little and often to people. So there's this concept of aggregated change that we refer to. It's the amalgamation of change that sort of hits the organisation. I mean, we've all worked on projects where people aren't using the features.
Always.
Yeah, exactly. So really what we're looking at here is the iterative changes. How often? What is the appetite for people to change every 2 to 4 weeks, for instance? And I know Will will talk about habits in just a moment. I can tell. But people don't change every 2 weeks. Yet we're delivering things every 2 weeks. So those are getting these features out, and we land these features that people are screaming for, and then I find only 5 people out of 100 are using it because it's not landed. And nowhere in Agile does it talk about how you achieve that. They're on to the next thing. When you aggregate that, you're actually then talking about change that's hitting the wider system of interest, and you've got emergent properties that you're uncovering, and there's a lot of change around that, which may change the direction of travel from where you thought you were going originally with your strategic vision. Do you want to talk about the habits?
I will talk about habits. So we started by saying that traditional program management sometimes expects a lot of people to hold on for such a long time for a change to finally arrive. It'll be amazing when it gets here. Agile approaches also probably expect a lot of people to be changing so quickly every 2 to 4 weeks, and people generally don't change that quickly. We could look at making the changes smaller, so we have little drops of change to come in, a little bit of Kaizen thinking to make it easier to digest and work with. But if we think about ProSci and ADCAR, the hallmark of change is ability. People are doing something different. So are we asking them to do something different every 2 weeks? That's quite a tall order. Habits bit is that for a while now, we've been thinking that when it comes to changes to stick, what we're really asking is for people to start acquiring new habits, because the brain likes habits and shortcuts. So for changes to stick and to become easy and new ways of working, they want to form habits, but they don't necessarily stick in 2 weeks either.
Yeah.
So they can take, there's a myth that they take 21 days. It's a bit longer than that.
Yeah.
It depends on the individual.
We were saying as well, if you ever try to take up gym membership in January, you'll know that habits are hard to stick.
Absolutely, absolutely. This is really interesting, and actually, I mean, a few themes that I'm gonna interpret and see if I'm right. Because Lynn, I heard you use words like system of interest and emergent properties, so I'm thinking there's an element of systems thinking in here somewhere. And Will, around the habits, I was thinking, and the author's name I've forgotten, but thinking fast and slow, with the element that you can have some sort of pre-made decisions and heuristics, which are sort of like habit forming in a way, isn't it? You don't want to have to think about it, type of thing. So lots of good themes that I'm sure we could talk about for much longer. However, one thing that is probably true is it seems that more organizations are focusing less on like Agile as a set of practices, and quite rightly more on agility as an outcome. And just in a few words, how would you describe the difference between agility as an outcome and Agile as a set of processes or principles or whatever? Sorry to put you on the spot.
It's a great question, and one that's very close to my heart, as you know, Adrian. I think you hit the nail on the head. Agile, when we talk about Agile, it's about a mindset. It's about values and principles. It's about how, if you apply these values and principles and adhere to these methods, then actually you will be applying those values and principles. However, in practice, I think we use Agile to help deliver solutions earlier. to achieve benefit earlier. And I think that's what traditionally we've been using Agile for, because it was designed to resurrect, if you like, the software industry where it was failing and people were complaining about long delivery lead times and lack of trust from IT to deliver anything. So I think Agile's worked really well in there. I think business agility, or agility in its sense, is more organizational. I think it's much, much wider than just Agile. And it's about applying the value and the mindset and the principles of Agile outside of that environment. It's about using those values, things like servant leadership, creating transparency, reducing waste, so applying lean thinking and all of that as well. And helping organizations to be more adaptive. Being able to respond to external pressures from the internal world and the external world as well. Being more adaptive to change within their processes so they can move quickly and change and adapt to that changing market is really what agility is about. And you can achieve agility by being agile, but actually most people just do Agile, which is a real shame.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would say on that so with the agility, what this brings to mind for me is a person's flexibility in how they apply their own stuff. So take a change methodology as an example. We feel that these are very good at directing your attention where it needs to be and gives you some clues of what to do when you're there. But it doesn't necessarily tell you how to do it, or whether your models will always apply in the same way in different contexts and environments. I think the context is key. Without context, there is no meaning. So for me, the flexibility is in how can it works over here. It's not working quite the same here. How can we adapt and get that agility into it so that it can still be a useful approach?
Yeah, and that context, I mean, that really resonates, I think, as generally, because I think what I see a lot of, and I'm guessing you probably see a lot of as well, is organizations that say, well, that thing worked really well over there in a completely different industry 10 years ago. Can we take it and apply it here without thinking? And sort of when you say that out loud like that, it sounds ridiculous, but it happens, right? It happens, and it's probably not going to end well, type of thing. So that reflexivity to adapt to the context seems so important. So fantastic. So in terms of your workshop, like, what are people going to take away? Because I mean, I'm sure people will be interested with what you've said so far, but what are the kind of key learning points or takeaways that they're going to get?
I think one of the key learning points is being able to understand the difference between scaled approaches and what we call traditional program management, and the gap that's forming around the change in those two. I think, secondly, they're going to learn an approach that we've been applying to that gap, which is the 3 different levels of change that we're articulating: iterative change, strategic change, which is top down, and then middle out, really, which is incremental or amalgamation of change, and how to deal with change in those areas. And that's really Will's bag. And then finally, some of the final bit will, what are the roles in scaled Agile, and how does that link with traditional sort of change management roles? Who do they need to speak to if they're working in the scaled Agile approach, and some sort of correlation between the scaled Agile roles and traditional change management roles?
I think what we'll also be able to show is that change in an Agile environment is fairly in its infancy. I think there's been some work on it, but it's got a little way to go. So we are going to be quite vulnerable in showing that we are feeling our way forwards on this, but we'll share some of the things that we've done. The traditional change management is quite waterfall in certain aspects anyway. And so how we've taken that and applied it in an Agile environment, we'll be sharing some of those learning outcomes as well.
Fantastic. That sounds like a huge amount in a half day. I mean, just a really sort of content-packed session, which is fantastic. So a final question, really. So, I mean, one of the reasons I like the BCT conference so much is it's interdisciplinary. And, I sort of, I guess I call myself a business analyst, although I'm less and less sure whether I'm just a business analyst these days, because I meet business architects who say they, actually there's a sort of overlap. So I really value finding out what other disciplines are doing. From your perspective, why should people come to the BCT conference generally?
I think it's exactly what you say. It's far-reaching. I think the problem with roles is it pigeonholes people. And sometimes if you go to a conference which is defined around a particular role, you find people that are all agreeable and like-minded, which is great. And it's absolutely fabulous for learning. When you're trying to help your organisation or other organisations move in different directions, it's really good to get a wider view. And I think the clue's in the title. It says business change and transformation. And that's really, really important. It's not stereotyping it down to a particular role. It's saying there are lots of people involved in business change and transformation, including business architects, business analysts, change managers, senior managers, leaders within organizations, so many different roles. And there are so many different aspects to it as well, which are really, really important. And there's some absolutely fantastic talks at this conference that I think really demonstrate that far-reaching. And I think we have to remember as well, change isn't about delivering IT. There's no such thing as an IT project, is there? All projects are change projects. And I think sometimes we forget that.
Absolutely.
And I would agree with what you've both said. It's diverse. I'm expecting that our workshop there'll be some old hand change practitioners in there. There will be folks who are brand new to it, someone with a little bit of interest in Agile, someone who's worked in program management, or none at all. One of the things that increasingly comes to me, I love what you said, Adrian, about so you're a business analyst, but you're wondering where else, what other spheres you occupy. A generalist approach to me is fantastic. And in change work, I find that increasingly we don't go deep enough. My particular interest there is how can we go deeper? If not us, then who? When it comes to the personal interactions, when it comes to having difficult conversations and having those skills. Coaching, for example, is a word that's thrown around a little bit willy-nilly. And so it's a very specific thing to do. It means different things to different people. So a good reason to come to this course, this conference. There's talks on ethics and talks that originate in psychotherapy or whatever. There's
case studies,
far-reaching.
Yeah, and it's really interesting, isn't it? Because I mean, I literally couldn't agree more with a couple of things you said there. So, Lynn, you said there's no such thing as an IT project. I'm smiling along when you were saying that, and Will, you were referring to the human side. And if I join those two things together, we might say, well, you know what? You can have the best tech in the world. You can have the best processes on paper in the world. If you haven't got people, then the thing's still going to fail. And actually, what the BCT conference does is bring a lot of different people together with different experiences. So one that I'm sure we'll all enjoy. It's in March, so it's in a few weeks' time. If you're tuning in and you haven't seen the website, there'll be a link in the comments below for you to go and register. And well, Lynn and Will, thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to seeing you at the conference.
Thanks, Adrian.
Thank you, Adrian.
Look forward to seeing you in a few weeks.
Bye-bye.